This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you reside now.
My name is Stephen Thomas Clark. I live in Canton, Mass.
Okay. How did you end up in Canton, Massachusetts?
After discharge from the Marine Corps, I lived back at my parents' house in Jamaica Plain. And the following year, I bought a house in Canton. And my wife, who I'm married to till now, we got married and she arrived. That's where we've been since.
What was your childhood like?
Very good time. We had a great childhood. We were, of course, we grew up in the city, but we had a lot of areas. We had ponds. We'd go fishing, bike trails. For the city, it was quite very nice.
What kind of education did you have?
I went to a parochial grammar school, and then to Boston English, and in Boston. And upon that, I was accepted at Northeastern, but never completed it. Went into the United States Marine Corps in 1966.
What did you want to be when you grew up, before going into the Marines?
I guess I wanted to be everything. It's probably why I went in the Marine Corps. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Went to Northeastern to study civil engineering, but a lot of things changed. A lot of things happened.
When did you decide to join the military?
I was on the way. My father worked for the A&P supermarket chain. He had a store in Dorchester, Mass. And I used to work there a couple of nights a week and on Saturdays. I was on the way over to my house from Jamaica Plain to Dorchester to work. And I knew I didn't feel like working, and I didn't feel like going to school, so I happened to stop. We were on the bus, and the bus stopped, and I happened to look out, and there was a library on the corner, and there was a Marine Corps poster, and a recruiting station in the basement of the. And I said, I'd get out and talk to them, see what they have to offer, and that's where it all began.
When you joined the military, how did your family take it? How did they react?
As we used to say, it went over like a lead balloon. It was not a happy time. My mother was quite upset, and my father thought I had made a bigger mistake. At that time, the Vietnam War was just starting, and it was a shooting war. And of course, my mother and father thought the worst.
Did anyone inspire you to join the military?
Not really, no. We grew up, playing cowboys and Indians and war, but no, not really.
Were you scared to go to the war? If you were, how did you mentally prepare?
No, I wasn't. We went through a lot of training before we went overseas, and I always followed the DI's suggestion to keep my head down.
What made you join the Marines instead of another branch of the military?
Well, I always was under the impression and read that the Marine Corps was the best service to be in. And I figured if I'm going to be in a war and get drafted, I might as well be in the best.
What was training like?
It was hard and fast. Everything you ever heard about the Marine Corps boot camp was probably 90% true. Training was hard, and it did pay off in the end.
Describe your first assignment in Vietnam.
My first assignment in Vietnam was joining up with our battalion and then joining up with our company. And our company was moving from a place called Dong Ha up to a military base called Cam Lo. It was an artillery base in the DMZ. And we took a ride up in we call them 6-bys. It was an open truck in the rain. And that's when I met most of the gentlemen I still know today. I looked around and listened to them, and I said to myself, I think I'm in the wrong outfit.
Describe a typical day in the service.
Probably 2 phases. The first phase was the war phase. It was every day was never a typical day. Every day was completely different from the first. Later on, when I was back in the States, it was sort of repetitious, and then I finished up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, at the military brig up there, and that was about a year, and that was very routine because it was a prison, and so it was a very routine, kind of boring, but very nice duty.
Why would you say that the Marines were the best?
Training, back to training. They pushed you so you think you couldn't go any further, but you could. And if you put it in, whatever you put in, you get out of it. So that sort of stayed with you the rest of your life.
What was your most memorable experience during your time in the military?
Most experience, geez, there's so many experiences. Probably the first Christmas in a place called Camp Low, and having some gentlemen, Marines behind me singing Silent Night as they passed around a wallet that the battalion gave us as a Christmas present. You got to figure out in the middle of nowhere, someone give you a new wallet for Christmas. You had no money to put in it and no place to use it anyways. I still have it. It's, dirty and I never used it. I put it away in my sea bag, and later on in life you find it. But it's hard to say. There's a lot of experiences. Maybe first time riding in a tank, first time in a helicopter, first time going over a net on a ship, landing in the monsoons, in a shore amphibious attack. Many, many things that you would never thought you would ever do that I did.
Describe the relationships you made during your time in the service.
Probably 15, 20 gentlemen that are still alive and all over the United States. When we meet, try to meet every 2 or 3 years. First couple of years we were every 5, 6 years. It was a 20-year hiatus between the time I was discharged till the first reunion. But we've gone almost every part of the United States. And some of us have even traveled to Europe. We had a commanding officer, which we were very friendly with. And later on in life, of course, he progressed in the service. His wife also was in the service in the Navy. And we got to know them, a lot of cruisers, met a lot of lieutenants that stayed in, became colonels, lieutenant colonels. To this day, still getting correspondence and cards between them, and just a good rapport.
What did you do for fun in the war, or what was your favorite part of a typical day?
One night we painted a Playboy bunny on the fantail of a ship. We lowered one of our Marines over the side with a paintbrush, and he painted a Playboy bunny on the tail of the ship. They weren't happy with it the next morning. We were what we call a battalion landing team, so we had a bunch of ships we were assigned to. Our equipment was on, not us, but our equipment. It was one of the pranks we pulled. Many other ones, but that was one of them.
Describe your happiest moment in the war.
Probably getting on a Continental Airlines heading back to the States. Once that plane took off from Da Nang, it seemed like all the world's weights were taken off your back.
Describe your scariest moment in the war.
Probably the first time you get shot at. Later on, there are many episodes that went on that you worry about it, but at the time your training again kicked in, and you just did what you were supposed to do. And as the old saying, do your job, and that's what we did our job. And maybe that's why I'm back here, I don't know.
What was the best part about serving?
Probably seeing the world, as they say. I mean, that boy grew up in Boston. All of a sudden I was in California, in San Diego. I was in Hawaii, Japan rather, and Okinawa, Guam, Wake Island. So you got to see a little bit of the country, I met people from all over the states, different backgrounds, not just people from New England, but from the South, from the Midwest, Northwest, Hawaii, Philippines, just a great bunch of people.
How were you treated by your fellow soldiers?
We were fantastic. It was a tight group. We watched out for each other and our backs, as they say, cover you, I get you covered, and that was true. It follows through to this day. I could pick up a phone and make a phone call today. My grandchildren could stay in Florida or California or anywhere else just by making a phone call. But these people that, over the years I was stationed with and served with.
How was your perspective of war changed since you served?
I don't think it ever changed. I think it was always the same. It's very hard on the soldiers and the Marines, anyone who's in combat. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of pressure. And you can survive that, you can survive anything else, really. Again, going back to training, when the training gets tough, you say, I'm ready to give up, and you can't give up because you have to keep moving.
How did you adjust coming home after the war?
I was one of these, I left Da Nang and landed in Okinawa, and they had a screening processing plant, an office there, and they would process you and put you on the next flight to the States. And it just turned out that I got off one plane, went over, got a soda, used the facilities, and was sitting around waiting, and all of a sudden they called my name, and I was on the next plane. So basically I spent 24 hours from the time I left Da Nang to the time I got to Boston. So it was nonstop. So I was quite tired, anxious to get home. I hadn't even had a chance to let my family know I was coming. So everything was a surprise to them. Just got home just before Christmas.
If you could go back and change something in the war, what would you choose?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Did other people have a different perspective of you since you served?
I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't tell you what other people thought. When I first got home, I had some problems with we went out to a nightclub one night, and there was some problems with a couple of young college kids, but that went on. Then when I was back in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at the brig, we had demonstrators and so forth like that. But I really didn't have any problems.
If you could go back, would you enlist again?
Yes, absolutely.
What were you most sad to leave behind in Vietnam?
A couple of guys I knew who didn't make it home. Sorry about that, but
No, it's okay. It's okay. Would you like to move on?
no, that's fine.
Okay. What is your family life like today?
Great. Absolutely great.
Do you still have connections with people you were in the military with you?
Yeah, very much so.
Any more questions? What was your job like after the military? Like, what field did you go into?
Well, I went into construction, and very interesting. My first job, we built the Mass Historical Society addition down in the Back Bay at Boston. So it was very interesting. I got to see George Washington's full dress uniform, when he took command of the Continental Army in Cambridge. I met a lot of people there, and they it was interesting. It was a 2-year job, and I went on from there, and it was interesting.
Did you ever go back to school after the military?
I was thinking about it, but no, I never did. I was in the Carpenters Union, and I was lucky. The 40 so years I worked almost every day. I was one of the very few that worked, but I worked for a couple of good companies, and then later on I started my own business, and I ran that for 20 years on my own, and then the last 20 years or so I worked for basically the same type of company. We did hotel interior finishes, laboratories, hospitals, you name it, we did it, operating rooms, morgues, museums, Berkeley School of Music, and we did a lot of different things.
Has the war inspired the career path you had after the war?
No, not really, not really.
Do you wish you went back to school, or are you?
Sometimes I do, but I've had a very good life. I've made a lot of money, and I've done very well.
Did you ever want more time in the war?
No, not really. What happens was when I came back, I was up in Portsmouth, and I was stationed there for about a year, and but there were downsizing the war at that point, and with the Marine Corps were bringing a lot of Marines back, so our jobs became easier and easier, and I was what they call a chaser, cross-country chaser. So we'd go out to Pease Air Force Base, which is now, I guess, Pease Air Force Park or something up in Portsmouth, and we'd meet the plane, and it'd be Navy and Coast Guard and Marines who were convicted for something, and they would be escorted from there to the prison. And sometimes they would do their time there, and other times they'd go on to a federal prison and for crimes committed. But not really. That was about it.
Would you go back to Vietnam to visit, just as a country?
It was a very beautiful country, but there was absolutely nothing there. I mean, as far as the rest of the world, it's probably changed a lot. I know it has changed a lot. I have friends that have been there. Of course, where we were, nothing's changed. The jungles are still there. The wet roads were dirt roads, and still dirt roads. The hills are still hills, so that hasn't, it's not like we fought in cities every time. My outfit was during the Tet Offensive, and I had just left, and they were a blocking action outside of Way, and no, I don't think much has happened there. They've probably built somewhat because the city was destroyed. But
did you meet anyone in Vietnam, like one of the native people?
Not really. When I was wounded on ship, I had an officer, a South Vietnamese officer, and the only thing he wanted me to do was buy cigarettes at a PX for him. I used to buy him cartons of cigarettes, but he'd pay me because they couldn't sell it to him, even though he was an officer. So I'd go to the PX on the ship, the hospital ship I was on, and buy him the cigarettes. And he in broken English, he said, "I'll see you after the war." I have never seen him since. I don't know who's buying the cigarettes now.
What did you do when you got injured in the war? Like, what was the first thing you'd have to do?
First thing, I don't know, I get mad. You get very mad when you get hit. I don't know if you're mad at yourself or mad at getting hit or mad at someone who hit you. I don't know. It's just getting mad and then realizing that, I get hit in the head. So I thought it was so hot and muggy. I thought I was sweating, and it turned out the sweat was all blood. So I had a corpsman not too far from me, and he came running over. And he saw my whole face covered with blood. So he knew he saw where the wound was, and he put a compression fitting on it. And then I was up helping a couple of friends who were also wounded, and he kept yelling at me to sit down, don't be moving around. And then we had a medevac chopper come from our ship. What we call was BLT, we're a battalion landing team. We were on a float. It was ships. They had 2 or 3 ships, and they sent a helicopter from the ship because we had a surgeons and operating rooms on the ship, and they picked me up and with 3 or 4 other guys, and they flew us down from, we were on this place called Quezon. They flew us from Quezon, but in the middle of flying, the monsoons kicked in and high winds and rain, so we had to land in the field till the storm blew away, and then we picked up from there and continued on out to the South China Sea and out to the ship, out to it was at Princeton, SS Princeton. And I got there, and the first thing they called me in, and the doctors ran, they cut all your clothes off you. And you were aware, there was no pain, it was just, look, they took it off, and next day I was going down the elevator to the operating room. So the doctor said, he said, I'm going to just sew it up. He says, I'm not going to take the shrapnel out of your head. He says, it could cause more problem taking it out than leaving it, so we're going to leave it and sew it. So 3 days later, I was back in the field, bandaged up, and got me new jungles, and out the door I went. Back in the chopper and back out to the place called Cam Low.
What did you eat while serving? Do you remember how the food tasted?
Sea rations. The only time we ate any food was when we were on ship, and the amount of time we were on ship would probably equal to about a week total. We were on a ship, go get a shower, get cleaned up, go get some food at the mess hall, and go and hit the rack, go to sleep. In the middle of the night, they'd wake us up and say, saddle up, we're going out. They'd pick us up by chopper over the side of the ship. We had these Amtraks, and we'd go off the back of the ship. They'd lower the stern of the ship into the water. These items would float. We'd go out and make a beach landing.
What was staying in Vietnam like? Did you have a room, or did you sleep in tents? How?
We slept under a poncho, which is basically a piece of plastic with a hole in the top of it. Which is you know what a poncho looks like. You buy them anyways. But that's what you take 2 ponchos, you clip them together. They had snaps. You can make yourself a tent to the A-frame. Got some twigs. You and your buddy would share a poncho. So now the 2 of you put together, now you get a shelter. You get in there and take your foxhole, and you cover your foxhole with the poncho in the monsoons. But you could never keep dry. After the first, second day of rain, because it would rain like going through a car wash. It just rained for weeks and days at a time. And so you decided, well, I'm going to be wet, because no paper or anything you kept would fall apart. So
were you able to, did you only have one uniform?
Yeah, usually you had one uniform. You just wear your pants and your shirt. You wear no undershirts or underpants or anything like that. A lot of guys didn't even wear socks, because we had jungle boots, and they would fill up with water. So socks, between socks and the sand and the mud, you get in there, it would be like sandpaper. It would actually tear the skin of your feet and make them raw. So what you do is you try to get some powder on them when it was possible to dry. When it was stopped raining, you take the boots off and you were sitting down and let the sun shine in on them. So you keep the jungle rot off your feet.
Who did you stay with when in Vietnam? Who did you sleep with? The same men?
No, it was
different every day.
we were in platoons, and it was what they call fire teams, 4-man fire teams, and you'd bunch up with say 4 or 5 of your friends, or 3 of your friends. They put you 2 guys in this hole, and you set up a perimeter at night. We were very rarely, like I say, probably a week, and maybe a week and a half of actually sleeping in a bed. We slept out in the jungle. We never had a shelter over us. The only time we had a shelter over us was when we were on ship. We'd go in, take a shower, clean up, You know, and if we have a chance, they take your uniform and run it through. But usually, your collar, your shirt would be black with the sweat, the oil off your body. I have a list of some of the operations that you can see, and just run down when they're dated. You'll see how much combat time was spent, and you figure, okay, when did you have time to go someplace? Just didn't. I mean, every outfit, the Army, they had barracks and stuff. The different branches had different. We were a battalion landing team, so they moved us wherever they needed us. They needed us 50 miles from here. They put us in a helicopter and fly us there and drop us there. Wherever they needed us, someone had a problem, someone was out patrolling and had a lot of enemy action, and they needed help. We were like the 911. They'd call us and we'd go, no matter where.
What was the weather like when on the ships? Do you remember any major storms that happened?
The only time we had storms in the winter. I mean, well, not the winter, but the rainy season, the monsoon season, and the rain would come down in sheets. And if you were in a helicopter, they would fly. And if we couldn't get the helicopters up because of weather, they put us in these Amtraks. You ever seen the old World War II movies of all these boats landing, they're dropping they put us out, and we were out one night, we dropped us over about 2 o'clock in the morning. We spent about 3 hours, 4 hours circling the mothership before we went in. And you get seasick, so you pass your helmet and puke in it, pass it to the next guy, and he'd dump it over the side and pass your helmet back. You don't want anyone puking on you.
What was your experience with animals while in Vietnam since you were in the jungle?
We were on one night we went on what they call an ambush. It was about 5 of us. Actually 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 9 of us. We went on an ambush, and we take a machine gunner. We call it guns. It was a machine gun with a guy with a running machine gun, and 2 other gentlemen with them, and 2 other Marines. And we'd go out on an ambush. We'd set up the machine gun, and we'd set up a V or an A shape, depending on the terrain. We think there was movement, and it would be probably half a mile from the base. They said, well, we got some enemy action in this area, so it stopped. And so we went out one night, and this is up in a place called J.J. Carroll, again, another artillery base. We ran an ambush that night, and elephant grass, and it was quiet, and pitch dark, no noise, and all of a sudden you heard rustling in the bushes. And it went on for about an hour and a half or so. Just to your right, to the front of you, it would keep moving, and this gunner and he kept moving like a machine gun with a sound with. And I was telling him, I said, anything, whatever that noise is, if it keeps getting closer, we used to say drop 20 rounds or drop a burst down there, 20, 50 rounds of ammo down and shooting it. So the sun started to come up, we had to break and head back to the base. So I said, we got to find out what that noise was out there. So we walked up probably about 50 yards up, and it's muddy, dirty area. And in the sand was paw. And it was a mountain lion, I would say. And you could put your hand and pass the other hand into that paw. That's how big that animal was. We never saw it, but we had paw prints. And another place I was up at Quezon, before we had an operation out of Quezon, we were up on the side of a hill, 861, and nothing had happened at that time. And I turned around and I looked, and down in the valley, I could see 3 elephants walking across. And nobody around. They were wild, apparently, or they were loose. And they were just walking by themselves along the river bank. There was a stream, and then into the grass area. And I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a wild kingdom. Watch these elephants walk by us. But it was quite. Those are the 2 animals stories I could tell you.
What weapons did you use during conflict? Like you said, you had like a machine gun.
They had machine guns. We had what they call grenade launchers. Was a grenade launcher, and he would be carried at 45 as a sidearm, and a grenade launcher. The radio man carried a 45. Most of the Marines carried rifles. And at that time, when I was there, we had the M14s. And anyways, halfway through, they sent us to guerrilla warfare school in Okinawa. They took us out of Vietnam and sent us to guerrilla warfare school. Took you out of the jungle, put you back in the jungle, and learn how to live in the jungle. Don't ask me why, but that's what they did. And they gave us what they call the M16. You know, a lot of my friends got killed because of the M16. The weapon never functioned properly, and in a situation when you're shooting at somebody or somebody's shooting back, and if you have a rifle that doesn't work, you're in a lot of trouble. You're really in a lot of trouble. You're out there without a weapon or out there, someone's shooting at you. So the outcome is going to be very deadly to you. And I had problems with it in Okinawa at the school, and I went to this lieutenant in McFarland, and I told him, I said, I want my 14 back. And it was about 10 of us complained, so he was able to get us, not all of us back, but let's say half the platoon M14s back. And I carried the M14 the rest of the war. It always worked. They said, well, the M16 is a lighter weapon and all this stuff, but the 14, you know, was a very good weapon for what we needed to do.
Did you have trouble moving from place to place so quickly when they?
Not really. We had. We used to call them two. They used to tell us, "Well, we're going to chop you out," and I said, "Oh, here comes the 2-bys. Your right and your left foot. We're going to 2-by. We're going to walk." And the Marine Corps can walk. They walk anyway, double time. They moved out fast. And once in a while, we'd go by truck along Route 1, which was the road that ran north and south in Vietnam. But 90% of the time, we flew by chopper to get us from one point to another. We went on an operation, what they call, down Beacon Star, down south of Da Nang, and they needed us up at Khe Sanh, and they sent us by truck to Da Nang and put us on a C-130 cargo plane and flew us up to Con Tien and up to Khe Sanh, and we landed at Khe Sanh. There was a strip there, and we landed in the mountains, and then we got out and we stayed there along the airstrip that night. Then next morning we moved out to we had a battle that's where I got wounded up in 861 was all right. 8 north and south, 881 north and south. On 880 north, I got hit. Excuse me, south. I got hit one night. It was artillery.
What was the most scenic part of your Marine experience? Since you moved quickly from place to place, were you able to take in how pretty it was? Do you remember?
Oh, it was very nice, very good, very. I mean, you could see the beaches. The beaches ran for miles in, from South China Sea in. You could see nothing but flat sand, beautiful. You could always say this would be a 5-star resort if it wasn't for the war. You know, I mean, the natives didn't like it because they couldn't grow anything on it. Further back, once they get away from the sand, they had the rice paddies and stuff. But then it went rice paddies, and all of a sudden the mountains showed up, and they went up. There were hills, you know, they were all meters, 900 meters. The roads were, one road ran north and south. Every other road was dirt-based road. They were in the monsoons. They just muddy. They weren't very passable. So that's why a lot of the choppers were used in inclement weather.
What was your political views during your time serving? Like, what was going on politically in Vietnam?
Nothing was happening with us in Vietnam, as far as I know, the political. It was all happening back in the States. The draft was still in effect, and the kids that were in college, or trying to get into college, were avoiding the draft. The kids that didn't qualify were getting drafted, and of course the kids who were getting drafted started complaining, and you know, that, hey, what's going on? Why are you picking on me? And, it was a lot of change. It was the late '60s, as they say. You can look it up in your book. It was just there's a lot of college kids were protesting the war, but it really wasn't affecting them because they were in college and they didn't have to serve. But they were looking down the road saying, well, I get out of college, my rear end is going to be over in Vietnam. So that's what it is. And the Democrats and the Republicans were back and forth. And Kennedy had gotten killed in the early 60s, and Johnson took over. And Johnson was trying to run the war. Instead of letting the generals and the people in the war run the war. It's like you trying to run the war from here. He was politically unstable in that end, and then he decided not to run for president. So, and Nixon came in, who was vice president before with Eisenhower, and he decided that he ran on that he would stop the war.
Were you able to contact your family at home during the war?
Through mail. You get stationery, but it was very hard to write because, again, the situation was out in the field. Everything you touched turned to nothing. It was just wet. You couldn't hold that cue card outside in a pouring rain and try to write something or hold a letter. So you get back on ship. There was stationery there. You write quickly on what was going on. It was fine, and say hi to everybody. You get a chance. Send some Lipton iced tea. Some iced tea. We poured it in our canteens because the water was so dirty. We thought we're going to drink dirty water. At least it tastes like tea. It was the color of tea, a lot of it. On the ship, it was all purified, so it was clean water. So you fill your canteens up and you clean your weapon and everything. Then all of a sudden they pull you up. So you'd have water for a couple of days until they resupplied you.
What would you say about your overall war experience?
It was a big part of my life. If you could survive that, you could do anything in life. You could do anything in life, And a lot of my friends stayed in the military. A lot of them went into teaching. A lot of them became teachers, surprisingly. A lot of them married girls that was nurses, which was very surprising. A lot of them married other teachers, But it seemed to be teachers, education seemed to be the norm. They went on to teaching. Some went on to teaching college level. Some became librarians in the universities. We had an Indian. We had a reunion back in Albuquerque, and he wasn't sure if he was coming or not, and so we felt kind of bad. And one of the gentlemen, Bill from Seattle, says, "Why don't we take a little collection between the two of us and buy him an airplane ticket, and take care of his room for him at the reunion?" And I said no. So anyways, we met him. He came and we met him, and he had a red Firebird outside, brand new, red like a fire truck, and a big eagle, gold eagle on the front hood. And I looked at him. His hair was braided, Indian braid. And he was nice. He said, "Oh yeah, he did very well." He lived off the reservation, but his parents still live on the reservation out in New Mexico. And so he was telling us that he had to get home. He had 3 boys, and they have to get some fence mended and fixed. So I said, "How many sections? They're going to section the fence here is 8 feet long, the most." He says, "Got 13." He said, "I got to get on it done before the fall comes, so you get the horses down." So it turned out he had a horse and cattle farm, and I was telling him that get the boys, kick them in the rear, and get them to put the 13 pieces of fence up. He kept looking at me like I was nuts, and I said, "What's the problem? They could be able to do it on a weekend." He says, "There's no way they can do 13 miles. The section was a mile long." So I was telling him to kick the boys in the rear and get them to move, to put the 13 miles of fence up on the weekends. But he owned something like 3,000 or 4,000 acres of land. He did very well for himself. He also, his grandfather taught him how to be a jeweler, making jewelry. And he liked to work with gold. And he had a sister that liked to work with silver. And if you ever come to the house, you'll see the photo. He won the national competition on jewelry, Southwest Jewelry, and he was a bronc riding champion, bull rider, national bull riding, and he had a buckle, and he'd won $100,000, and he bought $100,000 worth of gold and made a buckle for his belt out of gold. a friend of mine who went into the pharmaceutical business, radio man actually, Hal Burke. And Hal was in New York at a conference of pharmaceutical. He buying some earrings from his wife, and the show was on, so he went in to see him, talked to him, and everything. So he went to look at the earrings, and they were $15,000, and that was the cheapest piece of jewelry he had. So the poor Indian boy did very well in life.
If you could give advice to someone who's looking to go into the military, what would you say to them?
Now I'd say, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want to, be a dentist, or do you want to fly planes? If you're not sure what you want to do, maybe the Coast Guard would be ideal. Or the Navy, learn a trade or something in the electronics, something like that. Use the service to maybe get you through school, whether it's high school or not high school, but a trade school. Learn how to weld or learn how to fix diesel engines, jet engines. That's a whole field in itself, And you stop and think, you see it now. I had friends who were, like I say, were in the service, and we would go on bases. We would go on recruiting out to the Air Force Base out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This friend of mine is a lieutenant colonel, and of course he'd go to the officers club, and we had breakfast there, and you'd meet young kids that are learning how to repair jet engines, and fascinating. And then you'd meet other people in San Diego. These gentlemen are working on, young kids, 18, 19 years old, working on diesel engines or on Amtraks, big vehicles, and crew chiefs and so forth. So it's a career that they could bring to the civilian side. Electronics also, in the Navy especially, radar and sonar and guidance systems. There's a lot of electronics that you'd learn, that you pay a fortune to go to school to learn on your own. So it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if you have an idea what you want, it's something in the academies, West Point or Annapolis or the Air Force Academy. Those are opportunities. You want to learn to fly. A lot of these people who fly jets later on become your airline pilots to take you to New York or Cleveland.
Well, that's all the questions we have today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.